Are you still awake? Maybe it's not the noise outside that keeps you up tonight, but the quiet inside. The kind of quiet that echoes with questions. Soft, persistent questions you don't speak aloud. Why is it always so hard? Why me? Why does life seem to bless others and leave me behind? You've tried, you've worked, you've done your best, but somehow the road keeps folding in on itself. Money slips through your hands like water. Every time you get close to peace, another storm begins. You wonder if you're cursed, or forgotten, or if maybe there's something deeper you've missed. Tonight, I want to tell you a story, not to give you answers, but to help you remember something the world has made you forget, that suffering has roots, and those roots can be understood, gently loosened, and slowly released. So breathe with me, let the night hold you, and listen. This story begins not in a city or a village, but in a small monastery by the edge of a forest, where a young man once came, barefoot and broken, asking a very old monk a single question. Why am I always poor? Story 1. The Man Who Was Always Poor. A Buddhist bedtime story for the weary-hearted. It is late. The night has wrapped itself around the world like an old prayer robe, soft, faded, and full of stories. Somewhere in the distance, a bell chimes once, then disappears into the stillness. You are not alone in your questions tonight. Many before you have stared at the ceiling in the dark, whispering to no one. Why is life always hard for me? Why do I try and still have nothing? Is there something wrong with me? Is there something wrong with me? Let us walk together now, slowly, like old monks in fog, through the story of a man who once asked the same. He came barefoot. The soles of his feet were cracked like dry riverbeds. He wore no jewelry, no name, no plans. Only a hunger that lived behind his eyes, not for food, but for understanding. He bowed before the old monk seated beneath a tamarind tree and said, "I am poor, master, not only in coin, but in fortune. Every job I find vanishes. Every crop I plant dies. When I love, they leave. When I hope, it fades. Even the wind avoids me. Please, what karma have I broken? What debt have I not paid?" The monk smiled gently and motioned for him to sit. "I will tell you a story," he said, "but you must promise to listen all the way through, even when it is not the story you want to hear." The man nodded, though his shoulders were tired from years of disappointment. "Once, long ago," the monk began, "you were not poor. You were a man of power, a landlord, feared and envied. You owned fields that others worked until their backs bent like reeds. You set prices for rice and water, and laughed when the rain missed their villages. You did not believe in merit, only profit. You mocked the monks who came to ask for alms, turning them away with meat still in your teeth. You hunted animals for pleasure and taxed the poor for burying their dead. You were not evil, but you were blind, and blindness is a choice that always accrues interest. When you died, your wealth stayed, but your mind did not rest. Your craving came with you into another body, another birth. And here you are again, but this time with empty hands. The man trembled. "But I don't remember that life. Why should I suffer for what I don't recall?" The monk reached into a small basket beside him and pulled out a rock. "If I drop this rock," he said, "will it care whether you remember gravity?" The man shook his head. "Karma," the monk continued, "is not about memory. It is about motion. What you set in motion keeps moving until something stops it. Ignorance set it. Wisdom must stop it." The man wept. He was not angry, only tired. Tired of blaming the sky, the gods, the luck of other men. "So what can I do now?" he asked. "I have nothing, not even enough to give." The monk stood and walked slowly to the tamarind tree. He pointed to its roots, gnarled and exposed from age. "This tree feeds thousands, birds, bees, even strangers like you who rest in its shade. But it never went anywhere. It stayed rooted and let the world come to it." "Be like the tree," the monk whispered. "Give your shade, share your quiet, offer what little sweetness you still carry." Let me explain. In Buddhism, poverty is not a punishment, it is a result. Not all hardship is karmic, but when suffering is constant, repetitive, and patterned, we are asked to look inward. The Buddha taught that craving, tanha, is the origin of suffering. Not just craving for wealth, but craving for control, for superiority, for more. And when craving is combined with ignorance, especially the ignorance of how our actions ripple into others' lives, it creates karma. Karma is not vengeance, it is balance, a law older than gods, as silent as breath. When we harm, we incur debt. When we give, we plant merit. In the man's previous life, he planted seeds of harm. In this one, he reaps the absence of ease, so he may see what others once felt. But here's the miracle. Every moment we act with compassion, we rewrite our future. Even if you have nothing, your patience, your smile, your forgiveness, these are offerings. Each time you choose not to harm, you step out of the storm of karma and into the path of peace. Now, let's bring this closer to your heart. Maybe your suffering isn't from past lives. Maybe it's from this one, from years of feeling unworthy, unseen, unloved. From the stories your parents told you without words. From the shame you carry like old clothes you were too afraid to take off. Maybe no one taught you how to be free. Maybe you were born into a system that crushed your spirit before it even formed. That is not your fault. But what you do next is your choice. Buddhism doesn't ask you to be perfect. It invites you to be aware, to see clearly, to sit with your pain, not as an enemy, but as a teacher. And when you start giving, even if it's only kindness, only silence, only gentleness, you are creating a field of merit, and that merit will blossom. Not always today, not always tomorrow, but in time, in this life or the next. So now, dear listener, we rest, not in fear, not in blame, but in the soft knowing that everything can be transformed. The past is a stone, but you are the river. You may not control the rock, but you choose how to flow around it. Let us end tonight not with answers, but with a deeper breath. Not by hatred is hatred ended, but by love. This is an eternal truth. Dhammapada, verse 5. If you can love even while you suffer, you are richer than any king. Now breathe. Let the night hold you. Let go of what never belonged to you. And when you wake, carry the bowl of your life like a sacred gift, because it is. Story 2. The Empty Bowl That Fed 100. A bedtime story of silent giving, deep merit, and the wisdom of enough. The night is quiet now. No need to rush, no need to fix anything. You are here, and that is enough. Perhaps tonight your heart feels tired from trying to give to a world that never seems full. Or maybe you feel empty, like there's nothing left inside you to offer. If that is so, this story is for you. Long ago, in a mountain village brushed by wind and prayer, lived a woman named Anu. She was not rich, not wise, not young. She owned one wooden bowl, and every morning she filled it with rice, sat outside her hut, and waited, not to eat, but to offer. Anyone who passed, stranger, widow, child, or thief, she would smile and say, "Please, take what you need." Villagers whispered, "She's gone mad. Doesn't she know we all struggle? She has nothing and gives like she has everything." But Anu didn't listen. She just kept filling her bowl. And strangely, the rice never ran out. One day, a wandering monk came to the village. He had walked for days with no alms. The villagers, though devout, were weary from a long famine and guarded what little they had. But when he reached Anu's hut, she stood waiting. "I have only this bowl," she said, "but you are welcome to it." The monk bowed and took one scoop. Then he sat beneath a tree and ate in silence. Hours later, he returned and asked gently, "Why do you give when you have so little?" Anu smiled, the kind of smile that rises not from joy, but from peace. "I was once full of things," she said, "and full of suffering. I had 3 houses, 2 sons, and one very heavy heart. But they all vanished, fire, war, and time. When I had nothing left, I still had this bowl. And I found that the act of giving filled me again." The monk closed his eyes. He placed his palms together and whispered, "In the forest of selfishness, you are a flower of merit." And that night the villagers came, first out of curiosity, then out of hunger, then something deeper, a hunger not of the body, but of the spirit. They sat with Anu in silence. Some brought rice, some brought fruit, some just brought their grief. And as they ate, they cried. Then they smiled. Then, for the first time in many years, they sang, not of gods, not of wealth, but of gratitude. Now let us pause and reflect. In Buddhism, the act of dana, giving, is the foundation of the spiritual path. Before meditation, before renunciation, there is generosity. But true giving is not measured by how much you give. It is measured by how little you hold back. Anu's bowl was not magic. It was empty, but her heart was not. She had nothing, but she gave from her nothingness, not from scarcity, but from surrender. This is the paradox. When we are full of fear, we hoard. When we are empty of ego, we share. And when we give with no expectation, we enter into the stream of merit, the unseen current that carries all things forward. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha says, "The scent of flowers goes not against the wind, but the fragrance of the good man spreads in all directions." Verse 54. Anu's rice fed bodies, but her intention, her metta, fed souls. But what about you? Maybe you feel drained. Maybe you've given to others and felt forgotten in return. Maybe life took everything, your energy, your youth, your dreams. And now you sit with your own bowl, wondering if there's anything left inside it. Here is the truth. You don't have to be rich to give. You don't have to be strong. You don't even have to be happy. You only have to be present. Present with your breath, present with your pain, present with someone else's need. The smallest gesture, a warm glance, a kind word, a moment of silence, may ripple into someone else's life like the first drop of rain after drought. Modern psychology tells us this too. that helping others, even in tiny ways, restores the giver's sense of meaning, purpose, and emotional regulation. It grounds us. It brings coherence to a world that often feels fragmented. When you offer presence, you are not losing anything. You are remembering who you are. And now, dear one, rest. You do not need to be perfect. You do not need to give beyond your limits. But know this: if your bowl is empty, it may be ready to receive. If your bowl is full, it may be time to share. Let the image of Anu stay with you tonight. A woman with no family, no wealth, no title, only a wooden bowl and an open heart. And from that emptiness, 100 people were fed. As you drift into sleep, let these words hold you gently. A spoon of rice, offered with pure heart, outweighs mountains of gold offered in pride. A saying from the Theravada monks of old Sri Lanka. So close your eyes. Feel the breath in your body, like steam rising from a quiet bowl. You are enough. You always were. Story 3. The Daughter of Regret. A tale of generational sorrow, forgiveness long delayed, and the soft return of love. Some nights carry the scent of memory. Like smoke from an old fire, it lingers even after the flames are gone. Tonight may be one of those nights. Perhaps you're lying here not because you can't sleep, but because something unspoken is keeping watch inside you. A name, a silence, a wound passed down through years and faces. Something between you and someone you once called home. If you have ever felt that strange ache of unfinished love, this story is yours. There was once a girl who lived in a house that never forgave. Her name was Lian, and her mother, May, was a woman carved from silence. She spoke little, smiled less, and moved like a shadow through each room. Lian grew up studying the quiet, learning its moods, its sharp edges, its sudden storms. She learned to read the air the way others read books. When to speak, when to vanish, when to pretend nothing had happened, even when everything had. May had her reasons, people said. Her husband had left. Her youth had vanished. Her hopes had turned brittle with time. But Lion wasn't asking for perfection, only presence. Years passed. Lion became a teacher, then a mother. She built a life filled with softness, books, tea, laughter, garden herbs. She vowed never to pass on the silence. But one evening, as she tucked her daughter into bed, her child looked up and asked, "Why don't we visit Grandma anymore?" And Lion felt something splinter, because she didn't know the answer. Had she been angry all these years? Had she simply forgotten? Or had she become, in her own way, another echo of the silence? So she returned. After 23 years, Lion walked back into the house that raised her. It was smaller now, dimmer. The garden had gone wild, but the silence, it was still there, waiting. May was older, fragile but still proud. Her hair like soft ash, her eyes like windows half closed. They sat across from each other, two women who shared blood but not warmth. And for a long time, neither spoke. Until Lion whispered, "Do you regret how things were?" May stared at her teacup, then said softly, "Every day." And then she wept. Not the weeping of apology, not the performance of sorrow, but the sound of a dam finally cracking. Years of grief, loneliness, guilt, poured out like water too long held. "I didn't know how to love you," May said. "I was raised by a woman who beat me with her words, who never touched me unless it was to scold. When your father left, I lost whatever kindness I had left. I thought if I made you strong, you'd survive. I didn't realize I was starving you." Leon didn't answer with words. She only reached out, for the first time in decades, and took her mother's hand. Let's pause here. In Buddhism, suffering that is not understood is passed down. This is what we call dukkha, the inherent unsatisfactoriness of conditioned life. Pain that is inherited, wounds that become legacy, generational trauma wrapped in the silence of culture, of duty, of shame. We become parents carrying wounds of our parents. We raise children while still aching from our own childhoods. And unless we awaken to that pain, it repeats. This is samsara, the cycle of suffering, not just of rebirths, but of emotional patterns transmitted like invisible seeds. But Buddhism also offers the path out, not by erasing the past, but by seeing it clearly, with compassion. This is also what modern psychology tells us. Family systems repeat what they don't repair. Children adapt to survive and carry those adaptations into adulthood. Maybe you too grew up in a house where love was quiet or conditional. Maybe you never heard "I'm proud of you" without an if or a but. And maybe now, as an adult, you find it hard to love without fear, hard to trust warmth, hard to sit still in safety, because it feels unfamiliar. That's not your fault, but it is yours to heal. And healing doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it means forgiveness that never receives an apology. Sometimes it means giving yourself what no one gave you, permission to be soft, to be human, to be held. That night, after their tea, Leon stood to leave. Her mother followed her to the gate, something she had never done before. The wind carried the scent of blooming ginger. The silence between them had changed, not erased, but softened. "Will you come again?" May asked. Leon looked back, and for the first time in her life, saw not a mother who had failed, but a woman who had broken and kept going. "Yes," she said, and walked home lighter. And now, dear listener, we rest. Let go, just for this night, of what your parents didn't say. Let go of the warmth you never received. You do not need their apology to begin your healing. You are the continuation and also the transformation. As the Buddha once said, hatred does not cease by hatred. It ceases only by love. This is an eternal law. If you are the one who chooses to love differently, you are the ancestor your lineage has been waiting for. Close your eyes now, not in forgetting, but in forgiveness. Not in fear, but in soft release. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to begin again. Story 4. When the River Forgot Its Name. A gentle tale of identity lost, self-remembered, and the quiet path home. Tonight, you may not be looking for answers. Perhaps you're only hoping for a quiet place to rest the weight of your questions. Maybe for some time now, you've felt disconnected from your work, your role, your name, from the person the world thinks you are, and the one you feel quietly you were meant to be. As the Buddha once said, hatred does not cease by hatred. It ceases only by love. This is an eternal law. If you are the one who chooses to love differently, you are the ancestor your lineage has been waiting for. Close your eyes now, not in forgetting, but in forgiveness. Not in fear, but in soft release. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to begin again. Story 4. When the River Forgot Its Name. If you've ever whispered to yourself, "I don't know who I am anymore," then this story is for you. Once, there was a river that forgot its name. It had flowed for centuries, carrying rain from mountaintop to sea, whispering past rocks and roots, blessing villages and fields. It knew its rhythm, its place, its path. But one season, the storms came too fast. The mountain cracked, the earth shifted, and the river was forced to change course. It no longer recognized the banks it touched. The forests were unfamiliar. The sky above it felt colder. "Who am I now?" it asked the stones. But the stones only replied, "You are the water that passes." "Who am I now?" it asked the wind. But the wind moved on. The river tried to remember. It mimicked other rivers, rushed when they rushed, slowed when they stilled, tried to find beauty in reflecting sunsets, but felt nothing. At night, it mourned what it could no longer name, a shape, a sound, a feeling of belonging that had vanished like mist. And so, the river did what it had never done before. It stopped. The forest around it grew quiet. Birds paused their song. Deer stood still. Even the clouds seemed to hold their breath. And in that stillness, an old tree leaning over the water spoke. "You do not need to remember who you were." The river shivered. "But if I don't remember, how will I know where I'm going?" The tree whispered, "You are not lost. You are just changing." The river asked, "But if I change, do I stop being me?" The tree said, "No, you become more you than ever, because you are not the name, not the map. You are the flowing." Let's pause and reflect. In the teachings of the Buddha, the self we cling to, our name, role, career, history, is a convenient illusion. It helps us function, but it is not the truth. The Buddha taught anatta, non-self, that what we call me is only a bundle of ever-changing elements: body, thoughts, feelings, consciousness. Like a river, we are process, not object. When life shifts, when you retire, lose someone, change careers, or simply feel empty, you are not breaking. You are flowing. But ego fears that flow. It wants control. It says, "If I don't know who I am, I'm nothing." Yet the Dhammapada reminds us, as a flood sweeps away a sleeping village, so does impermanence take the clinging heart. Verse 287. To awaken is to stop clinging and begin observing. In modern psychology, this is called ego dissolution. And though it sounds frightening, it is deeply healing. When we detach from false identities, not abandon them, but gently loosen our grip, we begin to feel more whole, not less. People in midlife often ask, "If I'm no longer needed as a parent, who am I? If I don't do this job anymore, do I matter?" The answer is not in the next role you pick up. It's in the stillness between them, the pause, the breath, the moment where you stop striving to become and simply allow yourself to be. This is the medicine. This is the truth beneath identity. You were never the role. You were the awareness beneath it. The river, in time, began to move again. Not fast, not far, just enough. It greeted the banks without needing to know their names. It flowed through villages without asking who watched. It became quiet, clear, and kind. And one day, as the sun dipped behind the hills, a child knelt by its shore and whispered, "Look, mother, the river's come back." The river smiled within itself. Not because it was back, but because it had never truly left. It had only forgotten that the name was never the source. The motion was. So now, let yourself rest. You do not need to define yourself tonight. You do not need a title, a plan, a purpose. You are not your past. You are not your resume. You are not your reflection in someone else's expectations. You are the breath, the witness, the gentle current beneath all change. Let go now. Let yourself be nameless, like the river, and feel this truth rise quietly within you. Just as a river shapes the land without effort, so too does the awakened heart shape life through stillness. You are still flowing. You are still here, and that is enough. Story 5. The Monk Who Refused to Kill a Mosquito. A tale of small choices, vast consequences, and the unseen power of compassion. You're still awake. That's okay. Not every night is meant for sleep. Some are meant for remembering, and sometimes for unlearning. Tonight, I invite you to rest inside a story. Not a story of battles or victories, but of stillness and a very tiny moment that rippled outward like a bell in a quiet room. This story begins, as many do, with something so small you might not notice it at all. There was once a monk who refused to kill a mosquito. He lived in a small wooden hut on the edge of a restless village, a village where tempers flared fast and kindness often came too late. Every summer, the mosquitoes swarmed like thoughts in a troubled mind. The villagers cursed, slapped, scratched, burned herbs, lit fires. But the monk? He simply sat. He did not swat. He did not flinch. He did not curse. He just gently waved them away. And when one landed on his arm, he whispered, "You too are seeking warmth. May you find it somewhere else." The villagers thought he was mad. A holy man who lets insects drink his blood? He must enjoy suffering. Or maybe he's already dead inside. But he didn't answer them. He only kept sitting. Every morning before sunrise, every evening before dusk, the children would watch him wide-eyed. Some tried to copy him, until the first bite. Then they ran, laughing, back to the smoke. One day, a warrior from another town visited. He had heard of the monk who would not kill, and he came with a challenge. "If you will not strike a mosquito, surely you will not strike me. Let me insult you. Let me test you. Let me see what peace truly looks like." The monk bowed. "You may do as you wish," he said. "But know this. Each act, even done in jest, is a seed, and all seeds eventually bloom." So the warrior tried. He mocked the monk, spilled his rice, kicked over his water pot, even struck him lightly. The monk did not retaliate. He did not smile either. He simply bowed. "May your suffering end," he said. The warrior left confused, but something inside him had shifted. Not broken, not bloomed, just softened. Months passed. Seasons turned. The villagers began to change. Not by command, not by sermon, but by observation. They saw that the monk, bitten and bloodied, was still more peaceful than they were after feasts. They saw that his garden, untouched by pesticides or traps, grew herbs sweeter than theirs. They noticed that birds nested near his hut, and dogs, once wild, lay calmly by his door. And in time, they began to wonder, if a man can live in stillness with the buzzing of mosquitoes, what else might we be able to endure without harm? Let us pause and look deeper. In Buddhism, The first of the 5 precepts is simple. Refrain from taking life. Not just human life, not just large life, but all life. This is not a law to obey out of fear. It is an invitation to see the sacred in all beings, even the ones we deem annoying, tiny, or worthless. The monk knew to kill out of fear or habit or reflex is to strengthen that habit in the mind. Every time we strike with hands or words, we affirm that force is a solution. But to pause, to let something live, to recognize another being's right to exist, even a mosquito, that is not weakness. It is strength wrapped in gentleness. Modern psychology tells us this too. Impulse control, empathy, non-reactivity. These are not just signs of maturity, they are signs of healing. The small moment between stimulus and response, that pause, is where freedom lives. When you choose not to react, you choose peace. Not just for the mosquito, but for yourself. Because every time you resist harming, you loosen the grip of anger on your own heart. Back in the village, something remarkable happened. One day, a child picked up a rock, ready to crush a beetle, but stopped. She looked at the monk, who simply nodded. She set the rock down. The next week, her older brother broke up a fight instead of joining it. That same month, a father apologized to his son for shouting. And slowly, the village began to feel lighter. Not perfect, but less sharp. The monk never claimed credit. He just kept sitting. And the mosquitoes kept coming. But no one mocked him anymore. Now, dear listener, close your eyes. There is a part of you that remembers how to be gentle, even when the world is not, even when it bites. You do not need to swat away every irritation. Not every noise needs your anger. Not every small discomfort needs a war. Sometimes peace is not found in control, but in allowing what is to be. As the Buddha taught, victory breeds hatred. The defeated live in pain. The wise live in peace, giving up both victory and defeat. Dhammapada, verse 201. Tonight, you don't have to win. You don't have to defend. Just breathe and let what is be. Even the mosquito, even the memory, even yourself. Story 6, Ashes in the Wind, Kindness in the Bone. A quiet story of forgotten good, invisible merit, and the tenderness that lingers long after loss. Sometimes, the night reminds us of what we've given away. Things we once held tightly. A person, a dream, a version of ourselves. Now gone, like smoke rising through dark branches. And in their place, only a question remains. Did it mean anything? If you've ever wondered whether your kindness mattered, if your goodness was wasted, if your quiet love disappeared without echo, this story is for you. There was once an old man who swept a road no one walked. His name was not known. His face, wrinkled like cracked earth, went unnoticed. But each morning, before the stars had fully left, he took a bamboo broom and swept the narrow path that curved around the temple wall. The road was mostly abandoned, a dirt trail between trees, once used by monks in training, now forgotten in favor of faster routes. But still, he swept, slowly, patiently. Each leaf, each pebble, brushed aside like a prayer unspoken. People called him Dustman. Children teased him. Vendors rolled their eyes. Why sweep what no one walks, they asked. Why care for a road that goes nowhere? He never answered. He simply smiled, bowed, and kept sweeping. In the evenings, he fed the stray dogs, left fruit for crows, whispered blessings into empty shrines. No one saw. No one thanked him. Still, he bowed again at the sky each night and said, "Let this too be enough." Then one winter, he disappeared. No body, no note, just an empty mat, and the wind brushing leaves onto the path he once kept clear. At first, no one noticed. Then, slowly, things changed. The stray dogs began to howl at night. The crows gathered at the temple but did not eat. One monk, walking the old path for solitude, slipped on a pile of wet leaves and injured his knee. The next day, a child wandered into the forest and was lost for hours, until, miraculously, she was found sitting safely by the old sweeping stone. "I followed the sound of footsteps," she said, "but no one was there." Word spread. A few villagers began to walk the path again, at first out of curiosity, then out of reverence. Someone began to sweep. Someone else fed the dogs. Someone repaired the broken shrine. They never spoke about it, but something had awakened. Not guilt, not grief, but remembrance of something silent, steady, sacred. Let's pause here. In the Buddhist tradition, much is said about merit, the invisible energy we cultivate through compassionate acts. But the highest form of merit is not the one earned for praise. It is the one done in secret, unseen, unguarded, offered like incense to the wind. The old man knew this. He was not waiting to be remembered. He was practicing dana, selfless generosity. And more than that, he was embodying metta, loving kindness that asks for nothing in return. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha teaches, "Even as a solid rock is not shaken by the wind, so the wise are not moved by praise or blame." Verse 81. The dustman swept not to be seen, but because the act itself was the prayer. And what does modern psychology tell us? That kindness changes the brain, even when unacknowledged. Studies show that small, repeated acts of compassion, even without recognition, reshape the nervous system, build emotional resilience, increase a person's sense of purpose and well-being. Not because others applaud, but because we become who we are meant to be through what we give. You may not remember every kind gesture you've offered, but your body does, your heart does. Kindness is not just something you do, it is something you become. Back in the village, years passed. A new monk came to the temple. He was young, restless, skeptical of rituals. One day, he found an old journal in a cracked wooden drawer. It had no name, only pages filled with short, quiet reflections. Fed a wounded dog. It blinked slowly, the kind of thank you that doesn't need words. Saw a child drop a coin into the pond. Said nothing. The joy of giving should never be interrupted. Today I swept the path, even though I ached. The ache, too, can bow. The monk wept, not because the words were beautiful, but because they were enough. So now, dear listener, breathe. If your life feels invisible, if your efforts go unnoticed, if your love echoes into silence, know this. Every small kindness has already entered the fabric of the world. Every quiet act of care has already softened someone's suffering, even if you never see how. You do not need applause, you do not need memory, you only need presence, and a heart that says, "This, too, is worth doing." As the Buddha said, "Drop by drop the jar is filled, so too is wisdom gathered by the patient heart." Dhammapada, verse 122. So sleep now, knowing that nothing is wasted. Even your forgotten kindness has roots, and in some quiet corner of the world, a child is safe, A path is clear because of you. Story 7. The Man Who Ate His Past Lives. A surreal tale of forgotten lifetimes, the weight of flesh, and the awakening of compassion. You are here. That is enough. You don't need to fix anything tonight. You don't need to become anyone. Just breathe. Gently, slowly. Let your body soften. Let the day fade like footprints beneath falling snow. And if somewhere inside you there is a hunger, not for food, but for meaning, then this story was meant to find you. There once was a man who could not stop eating meat. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't gluttonous. But every time he smelled roasting flesh, his hands moved before thought. Lamb, duck, ox, deer, he devoured them all. Not for pleasure, but because something inside him whispered, "This is what you are made of." He often woke in the middle of the night, sweating, teeth clenched, mouth full of imagined blood. Sometimes he heard voices as he chewed, not screams, but sighs. One evening, in a quiet tea shop near the edge of a forest, he met a monk. The monk watched him eat, slow, deliberate, detached. And when the man finished licking the grease from his fingers, the monk asked, "Do you ever feel like your food remembers you?" The man froze. "What?" The monk smiled, not unkindly. "I used to be like you, until I saw my grandfather's eyes in the eyes of a cow." The man laughed, uncomfortably. "Ridiculous," he muttered. But that night, he couldn't sleep. He dreamed of hooves pounding through a field of fire, of a woman crying over a pig's severed head, of a tiny fish gasping as his own childhood face stared down from above. He awoke trembling. The hunger inside him had changed. It wasn't craving, it was grief. He returned to the tea shop. The monk was waiting. "I want to understand," the man said, "not just with words, with whatever it is that keeps showing up in my dreams." The monk nodded. "You are eating your past," he said, "and your past is not at peace." He poured the man a bowl of broth, clear, plant-based, quiet. "Begin here," he said, "not because you must, but because you're ready to remember." Now, let us pause and reflect. In Buddhist teaching, the act of eating is never separate from consciousness. To eat is to connect, to ingest karma, to participate in the great web of becoming. When we consume the flesh of another being, we take in not just protein, but their fear, their death, their story. The Buddha himself addressed the ethics of eating meat. In the Jivaka Sutta, MN 55, he allowed monks to accept meat that was not killed specifically for them, but the deeper teaching is clear. Where suffering is present, mindfulness must enter. And in later Mahayana and Zen traditions, the vow of compassion expands to honor all life and abstain from harm wherever possible. But this isn't just about food. Modern trauma science reveals that the body keeps score. We carry memory in the muscles, the nervous system, the gut. And for those who believe in past lives, the body may remember even more. Sometimes our hungers are not ours. Sometimes our cravings echo through lifetimes, unquestioned, unexamined. To change how we eat is to change how we relate. To choose plant-based foods, not out of rule, but out of reverence, is to begin unbinding old knots of harm. Back in the tea shop, the man kept returning. Day after day, he ate only what the monk offered: roots, leaves, rice, warmth. The dreams lessened, then deepened, then clarified. He began to see himself as a butcher in one life, a frightened goat in another, a farmer, a fox, a boy stealing eggs, each life feeding the next, each life longing to be seen. And one day he fasted, not to punish, not to purify, but to listen. He sat beside the monk in silence, and as the evening sun touched the tea shop's wooden floor, he wept, not out of guilt, but relief. He had stopped the cycle, not the hunger, but the forgetting. Now, dear listener, return to yourself, not to shame, not to judgment, but to presence. You do not need to give up everything tonight, but you can begin to listen to your plate, to your body, to the quiet voice beneath appetite that whispers, "Is this kind? Is this needed? Is this the direction I wish to turn?" The Buddha said, "All beings tremble before violence, all fear death. See yourself in others. Then, whom can you hurt?" Dhammapada, verse 129. Let that truth enter you like breath, and let yourself sleep now, not full, but light, not empty, but aware. You are remembering, and that is more than enough. Story 8. The Old Woman Beneath the Bodhi Tree. A tale of loneliness, quiet strength, and finding home in the present moment. You've made it to this moment. That's all that matters. Maybe today was long. Maybe the world asked too much, or nothing at all. Maybe the silence tonight feels louder than usual. If you've ever sat in your room and felt like time forgot you, if you've ever wondered what your life has added up to, this story is for you. There was once an old woman who lived near a monastery. Her name was Anjali. She had silver hair, eyes like dusk, and hands shaped by decades of stitching, planting, and letting go. She had outlived her husband, her brothers, and her dearest friend. Her only daughter lived far away, a voice on the telephone once a month. Each morning, Anjali lit incense at her small altar, not to ask for anything, just to say, "I'm still here." She liked to walk, and every day she passed beneath the wide branches of the Bodhi tree, the same kind of tree, she had heard, where the Buddha once sat. She would rest on the stone bench beneath it, watching light shift through leaves like slow-moving thoughts. No one joined her. Monks passed, bowed politely, and continued. She wasn't waiting for conversation. She had learned that quiet was not the enemy. It was what remained after everything else was gone. But one day, a young monk stopped. He had just finished sweeping the courtyard and noticed her stillness. He bowed and asked, "Do you come here to pray?" She smiled faintly. "No," she said, "I come here to disappear." The monk sat down beside her, gently. "May I disappear with you then?" he asked. And they sat, in the kind of silence that feels full, not empty, the kind of silence that remembers. The next day he came again, this time with tea. And for many weeks after, they shared those late mornings beneath the tree. She told him stories, not of glory, but of bread rising in the oven, of the feel of her daughter's hand the day she left for school, of how silence changes its shape after loss. He listened like the earth listens to rain. And one day he asked, "Are you afraid of dying?" She looked at the falling leaf on her knee. "No," she said, "I'm only afraid of leaving before I fully arrived." Let us pause and reflect. In Buddhist thought, old age is not a tragedy. It is a threshold. The Buddha himself spoke often about the inevitability of decay, not with fear, but with reverence. Aging reminds us that everything we cling to, body, identity, reputation, is impermanent. But within that impermanence is the chance to awaken. Because when there is less future to chase, the present becomes precious. To grow old is to draw closer to the truth of all things. That we were never in control. That now is all there ever was. Modern psychology echoes this wisdom. Older adults who find meaning in everyday acts, tea-making, gardening, small rituals, experience more peace, less anxiety. Loneliness does not come from being alone. It comes from feeling unseen. But presence, real, mindful, heart-open presence, even for a few minutes a day, can restore a sense of belonging. It is not always the family that heals us. Sometimes it is a stranger who pauses, listens, and stays. Back beneath the Bodhi tree, time passed like wind over stone. Anjali's steps grew slower, her eyes softer. One morning she did not come. The young monk found her at home, seated by her altar, a faint smile on her lips, hands resting peacefully on her lap. She had passed like a candle letting go of its own flame. They buried her ashes beneath the Bodhi tree. No grand ceremony, just soft chanting, and tea shared in her honor. A small plaque was placed near the bench. It read, "She came to disappear and became the presence we never forget." So now, dear one, let yourself rest. You are not forgotten. You are not behind. You are not too late. The you who feels lonely, the you who wonders if it's all been worth it, that you is worthy of gentleness. Let go of striving. Let go of roles. Let go of needing to be more. As the Buddha said, with no possessions, with no desires, pure and free, the wise rest like the moon in a cloudless sky. Dhammapada, verse 93. Let your breath be that moon, steady, quiet, enough. Tonight, let this story sit beside you like a friend and sleep, as if the Bodhi tree were standing just outside your window, holding you, leaf by leaf, into stillness. Story 9. How the Sparrow Reached Enlightenment. A quiet fable of simplicity, humility, and the awakening that hides in small lives. Some truths are so gentle they arrive on wings, not in thunder, not in fire, but in the sound of soft feathers brushing against the morning light. Tonight, you don't need to understand everything. You don't need to conquer your mind. You only need to listen. Because sometimes wisdom comes not through effort, but through a little bird, a very small one, that no one expected to awaken. There once was a sparrow who lived in the eaves of an old monastery. She was plain, brown as dust, light as a breath. No one wrote poems about her kind. The crows cawed loudly in the trees. The peacocks dazzled in the courtyards. Even the doves received offerings from the monks. But the sparrow? She gathered crumbs, wove nests from fallen threads, sang softly to herself. No one noticed, not even the wind. One morning, a young monk sat beneath the tree where the sparrow lived. He was tired from meditation, tired of trying to become enlightened, tired of silence that felt more like emptiness. He sighed and said aloud, "I wish I knew what it takes to awaken." And just then, the sparrow fluttered down beside him, tilted her head, and picked up a crumb he had dropped. She looked at him once, as if to say, "I already have." Then she flew away. The monk was puzzled, amused, Curious, he began to watch her, day after day, from the kitchen roofs, the temple walls, the stone paths. She never preached, never strived. She only did what sparrows do. She lived fully. She drank when thirsty, slept when tired, sang when the morning called her name. No resistance, no stories, just presence. And the monk began to wonder, could this, too, be practice? Let us pause here. In the Buddha's teachings, there is no requirement that one must be special to awaken. You don't need wealth, or power, or 1,000 sutras memorized. You only need right view, right effort, and a heart that returns again and again to awareness. The sparrow was not a scholar. She was not even human. But her life was aligned with Dhamma, the natural way of things. She did not cling. She did not resist. She did not ask the world to be different than it was. And so she flew, unburdened. Modern psychology supports this wisdom. Happiness is not found in complexity, but in mindfulness, routine, and enoughness. When people live with intention, eat slowly, breathe consciously, notice the details, their nervous systems regulate, their emotions stabilize, their sense of connection deepens. The sparrow does not know the word enlightenment, but she lives it, not in concept, but in behavior. And this, too, is a form of awakening. Back at the monastery, the monk changed. Not drastically, not loudly, but each day he watched the sparrow. And when he walked like she did, lightly. When he ate, he gave thanks, not with chants, but with stillness. He stopped chasing a moment called enlightenment and began bowing to the moment already here. Years passed. The sparrow grew old. One morning, she did not come down. Her nest was empty, her song gone. The monk stood beneath the tree and whispered, "Thank you, little teacher." He folded his palms, and for the first time in his life, he understood what the Buddha meant when he said, "In seeing one thing clearly, the path is seen." So now, dear listener, rest. You don't need to be grand to be free. You don't need to master anything tonight. If you can sit with your breath, if you can smile without reason, if you can feel the softness of this moment, then you too are already walking the path. As the Dhammapada says, like a bird in the sky, leaving no tracks, the wise one moves freely, unattached to the world. Dhammapada, verse 93. Let that bird be your guide tonight. Let its wings carry your thoughts to stillness. Let its song echo inside your own quiet heart. You are enough. You have always been. Sleep now, like a sparrow who knows no name, but lives as if the whole sky were hers. Story 10. The Voice Beneath the Silence. A tale of listening inward, the language of presence, and the soft voice that waits in stillness. Some truths don't speak in words. They arrive in a pause, a breath, a moment when the world stops shouting and something inside begins to whisper. Tonight, you don't need noise. You don't need answers. You only need to remember how to listen. Because beneath the silence you fear is the voice that has always been yours. Once there was a monk who forgot how to hear, not with his ears, but with his heart. He had memorized every sutra, chanted every verse, sat for years on cold stone floors, chasing enlightenment like a firefly in the dark. But the more he studied, the less he understood. The louder the temple bells rang, the emptier he felt. He asked his teacher, "Why can't I feel the truth anymore?" The teacher looked at him gently and said, "Because you're mistaking the echo for the voice." Confused and humbled, the monk left the monastery. He wandered through forests, deserts, cities, seeking someone, anyone, who could teach him how to hear again. He listened to preachers, poets, philosophers. Each gave him something to ponder, but nothing to feel. One night, lost and exhausted, he stumbled into a valley so quiet he could hear his own heartbeat. And there, beneath the stars, he heard something else, a sound so faint it might have been imagined. "Welcome back." He turned. No one was there, just the wind through grass, the moonlight brushing leaves. But the sound remained, not in his ears, but in his bones. Soft, familiar, like the voice of a parent he had forgotten. It said nothing more, but in that nothing was peace. Let's pause here. In Buddhist teaching, the voice of truth, what some call Dhamma or even Buddha nature, is not something outside of us. It is not in the books, not in the chants, not even in the temples. It is in the stillness between thoughts, in the silence beneath speech, in the quiet awareness that watches everything but clings to nothing. The Buddha said, "Be a lamp unto yourself. Rely on no one else." Not because others have no wisdom, but because the deepest wisdom is already within. Modern psychology calls this inner knowing. Not logic, not emotion, but felt sense, a gut feeling, an intuitive clarity. The quiet certainty that emerges when we stop overthinking. When people slow down, breathe, and tune in, they often find they already know what to do. The problem isn't lack of wisdom, it's too much noise. And in a world addicted to answers, sometimes the bravest thing is to listen to the question. The monk stayed in the valley, not to meditate, not to fast, but to be. Each day he walked barefoot through the grass, listened to the wind, cooked simple meals, watched stars. And in time, the voice returned. Sometimes it said, "Breathe." Sometimes, "Let go." Most often, it said nothing. But in that nothing, there was more comfort than 1,000 teachings. Years later, travelers found the monk. They had heard of the quiet man who smiled without reason, who answered without speaking, who healed without touching. They asked him, "What's the secret?" He smiled and placed a hand over his chest. "Everything I needed," he said, "was waiting beneath the noise." Now, dear listener, let go. Not of your life, not of your hopes, but of the need to figure it all out tonight. There is a voice inside you, softer than breath, older than thought. It does not demand, it does not shame, it does not shout. It waits. And when you're ready, it will say, "Welcome back." As the Buddha said, "Within this very body, mortal though it be, is the world, the origin of the world, the end of the world, and the path that leads beyond." So sleep now, not in confusion, but in trust. The voice beneath the silence has always been there. And tonight, you are learning how to hear it again. Story 11. The Husband Who Dreamed of Another Life. A gentle parable of restlessness, illusion, and the quiet beauty of what already is. Not all dreams happen at night. Some linger behind your eyes in daylight. Some whisper beneath your daily routines. Maybe there's more. Maybe somewhere else. Maybe someone else. If your heart has ever ached for a life you don't live, if you've ever stared at your reflection and wondered, "Is this really it?" then this story is yours. There once was a husband who dreamed of another life. His name was Taro. He lived in a small home by a river, with a wife who loved quietly and a son who asked too many questions. He had a job repairing lanterns. Simple work, repetitive. He had a garden of basil and spring onions. He had evening meals and early mornings. He also had a longing, a whisper like a breeze under the door that said, "This is not enough." At night, Taro dreamed of palaces, of silk robes, of voices that called him wise, of a woman with eyes like distant stars who kissed him as though he were made of light. When he woke beside his real wife, with her crooked teeth, warm breath, and sleep lines, he sighed. When his son asked questions, he grew impatient. When he repaired lanterns, he grew restless. He began to walk the streets at night, hoping to glimpse something, anything, that looked like the dream. One evening, he passed a quiet temple. A monk stood sweeping the steps. Taro paused. "Tell me," he said, "have you ever felt like you were meant for something else?" The monk stopped sweeping. "Every day," he replied, "and every day I sweep anyway." Taro frowned. "But don't you want more?" The monk smiled. "What if more is what keeps you from seeing what's already here?" Taro scoffed and walked away. But that night, his dream changed. The palace was dimmer, the woman faceless. Let's pause here. In Buddhism, craving is known as tanha, a thirst that has no end. It is not wrong to wish for joy, love, or beauty, but when we believe happiness exists only in the next thing, we suffer. The Buddha taught that illusion, maya, makes us chase shadows. We compare, imagine, escape. We project fantasies onto strangers and resentment onto loved ones. And all the while, we miss the sacredness of what is directly in front of us, not because it's lacking, but because we're not truly present. Modern psychology calls this hedonic adaptation. The mind adjusts to new pleasures and then demands more. Fantasies offer relief, but they rarely deliver fulfillment. Real peace doesn't come from changing our life. It comes from being awake inside it. When we begin to notice the smell of rice, the softness of a child's hand, the quiet presence of someone who stays, we return to the moment. We return to ourselves. And in that moment, we are whole. Back in his home, Taro woke one morning before dawn. His wife was still asleep. His son curled like a question mark. The house was quiet. And for the first time, Taro sat in the kitchen and simply breathed. He listened to the wind move through the herbs. He watched the steam rise from his tea. He did not feel regret. He did not feel magic. He felt still. That day, he returned to the temple. The monk was sweeping again. Taro bowed. "I've lived half my life waiting to feel like someone else," he said. "But today, I just repaired a lantern, and when I lit it, it felt like the first sunrise." The monk nodded. "You have awakened," he said, "not from sleep, but from the dream. So now, dear one, return. Return from the fantasy. Return from the if-onlys, the what-ifs, the maybe one days. Return to this room, this body, this breath. You do not need a palace. You do not need to be adored from a distance. You only need to notice. The way your chest rises, the way the night cradles you, the way your life, as it is, waits patiently for you to see it. As the Buddha said, There is no path to happiness. Happiness is the path. Let that truth settle like warm tea in your belly. You are already home. Now, close your eyes and let go of the dream, so you can wake gently into the life you've been given. Story 12. The Fisherman Who Let the Ocean Go. A parable of desire, letting go, and the freedom found in surrender. Some stories begin not with words, but with silence. The kind of silence that rises like the tide, slow, certain, and filled with something unsaid. Tonight, you don't need to chase anything. Not peace, not meaning, not even sleep. You are already here. And this story is about a man who spent his whole life holding on until one day he let go. There was once a fisherman who loved the ocean more than anything, not for its beauty, not for its rhythm, but for its giving. Every day it gave him fish, enough to feed his family, enough to trade in the market, enough to feel, if only briefly, life made sense. He praised it, prayed to it, built a shrine with seashells and driftwood. He even gave it a name, My Forever. But the more he caught, the more he wanted. Not just fish, but control. He began to fear the days when the nets came up empty. He cursed the tide, blamed the wind, sailed farther, stayed longer. He stopped noticing the stars, stopped listening to the waves. His wife said, "You're never home." He replied, "The ocean needs me." But truthfully, it was the other way around. One morning, he met an old monk sitting on a rock by the water. The monk watched the sea, not with hunger, but with stillness. The fisherman scoffed, "You waste time. The fish won't come to you." The monk smiled, "I don't fish." "Then what are you watching for?" The monk replied, "To see if I still believe I need anything." The fisherman laughed, then left. But that night his dream was strange. He stood in the middle of the sea, holding a single fish, but no matter how tightly he gripped it, it kept slipping, melting into salt and foam. He awoke uneasy, and for the first time in years, he did not go to the shore. Let's pause here. In Buddhist teaching, craving, tanha, is not just about lust or greed. It is the mind's grasping, wanting things to stay, to grow, to give more than they can. And what we grasp, we suffer for. The ocean in this story is not the enemy. The fish are not evil, but the attachment to them, the belief that happiness depends on getting more, that is the root of suffering. The Buddha taught, "From craving springs grief. From craving springs fear. But one who is free of craving has no grief, no fear." To let go is not to lose. It is to be free. Modern psychology agrees. Attachment isn't just emotional, it's neurological. The more we cling to people, success, outcomes, the more anxious we become. Letting go doesn't mean not caring. It means caring without controlling. It means choosing presence over possession. When we stop grasping, we start breathing. Back in the village, the fisherman changed, slowly. He still sailed, still cast his net, but he stopped expecting. He started watching. He began thanking the ocean even when it gave nothing. One day, he came home with an empty basket. His wife looked at him, and for the first time, he smiled and said, "It was enough just to be out there." He returned to the monk's rock. They sat together watching the water. The monk asked, "What did you find?" The fisherman replied, I thought the ocean was mine, but it was never mine. And now that I know that, it's even more beautiful." The monk bowed. "You have let the ocean go, and in doing so, you've come home. So now, dear one, release. Not the dream, not the love, but the need to control how it all unfolds. Breathe out the clenched fists, the if-onlys, the tight knots of expectation. Let it go, just for tonight. You don't need to catch anything. As the Buddha said, just as a bird in the sky leaves no tracks, the one who lets go leaves no sorrow. Let the tide carry your thoughts away. Let stillness rock you like a boat under moonlight. You are already enough, even if your nets are empty, especially then." Story 13. The Child Who Never Cried Again. A tale of silent wounds, emotional awakening, and the return of sacred tears. There are nights when the body is tired, but the heart stays awake. Not from worry, but from a quiet ache, the kind that comes from something long held in. If you've ever found it hard to cry, if your chest has ever felt full but no tears came, this story is for the version of you that once needed to be strong, and maybe still does. There once was a boy who stopped crying at the age of 7, not because he grew up, not because he learned to cope, but because one day, when he cried too loudly, his father slammed the door, and his mother whispered, "Quiet, you'll upset him." So the boy folded the sound back into himself, like a crumpled letter no one wanted to read. And from that day forward, he never cried again. He still felt, of course he did. When his dog died, he walked silently into the forest and sat for hours. When his favorite toy was broken by a careless cousin, he smiled and said, "It's okay, I didn't like it much." When his heart broke at 15, he stared at the ceiling all night, eyes dry, fists clenched. People called him strong, resilient, mature beyond his years. But inside, a dam was building. Years passed. He became a man, got a job, paid his bills, learned to laugh in just the right places. But when he was alone, the silence inside him didn't feel peaceful. It felt tight. When people cried in front of him, he panicked. When he tried to love, he couldn't feel fully present. When joy came, it didn't stay long. Like a bird landing on a branch, then flying away before he could reach. And still, no tears. Not even when his mother passed, not even then. One winter, on a trip he didn't plan, he visited a Zen monastery, not for religion, not for peace, just to be somewhere else. The air was cold, the tea was plain, the silence unbearable. Until he met an old nun in the garden, sweeping snow off a stone path. She looked at him once and said, "Your body is holding something your mind won't touch." He didn't know what to say, but her voice, it broke something. That night he had a dream. He was 7 again, hiding under a table, hands over his ears, face pressed against his knees. Then a hand, gentle, weathered, reached for him. It was his own, older, steadier, and his older self whispered, "It's safe now. You can cry." He woke up gasping, and for the first time in 20 years, he wept. Not a sob, not a flood, but one tear, then another, and then the river came. Let's pause and breathe. In Buddhism, the path of healing includes acknowledging dukkha, suffering. Not to indulge it, but to see it clearly, without fear. The Buddha never taught that emotion was weakness, only that clinging to anything, even pain, prolongs it.
Tears are not attachment. Tears are release. They cleanse, soften, wash away the illusion that we must always be composed. As the Dhammapada says, by oneself is evil done. By oneself is one defiled. By oneself is evil left undone. By oneself is one purified. Verse 165. Healing begins within. Modern psychology confirms this. Children who are not allowed to feel become adults who can't connect. We learn early which emotions are safe to show and which are not. When we suppress long enough, the body holds grief in tension, illness, fatigue. But when we create space for feeling, even one breath of it, we begin to thaw. We return to the child inside us, who didn't need fixing, only holding. The man stayed at the monastery for a week. He did not talk much. He walked. He breathed. He listened to the sound of his own footsteps on snow. And each day a little more came loose. A memory, a sigh, a single wordless sob behind a closed door. No one judged, no one tried to help. They just made room. When he returned home, he wasn't healed, but he was different. He hugged his sister without armor. He looked at old photographs without freezing. And one evening, when his partner cried, he didn't flinch. He sat beside her, placed a hand on her back, and said, "I'm here." And he was. Now, dear listener, soften. If you've never cried for something that deserved tears, it's not too late.
If there is a silence in you that aches, know this: you are not broken. You are holding more than one heart should carry, but you don't have to carry it alone anymore. As the Buddha said, "The wise one, full of compassion, shines like the moon free from clouds." Let tonight be the first loosening. Let your breath be the breeze that stirs the still waters. Even if no tears fall, know they are there, beneath the surface, waiting, ready. And when they come, let them fall like rain on dry soil, not as weakness, but as return. Story 14. The Garden That Grew in the Cold. A gentle tale of unseen growth, patient merit, and beauty that blooms beyond the season. Not everything beautiful grows when you expect it to. Some things bloom in silence, in waiting, in soil no one else would touch. Tonight, if you're feeling like nothing is changing, if you've planted seeds and seen no sprouts, this story is for you. Because sometimes the garden comes later, much later, but it comes. There once was a man who planted a garden in the middle of winter, not because he was foolish, but because he had nothing left. His house had burned in a lightning storm. His family had moved away. His voice had grown quiet, like footsteps on snow. So one morning, with trembling hands, he cleared a patch of frozen earth behind an old shed and began to dig. The villagers laughed. "Nothing grows now. You're wasting time. Better to wait until spring." But the man said nothing. He just knelt each day and placed one seed after another into the hardened soil. Sunflower, basil, marigold. Not because they would survive, but because they deserved a chance. And when he finished, he bowed to the ground and whispered, "I trust you." Days passed, then weeks, then months. The snow fell heavier. The sky stayed gray. Each morning, the man visited the garden, not to check, not to hope, just to sit, to breathe, to remember what it meant to care for something. And though nothing grew, something softened, not in the soil, but in him. Let's pause here. In Buddhism, effort is not always about results. It is about right intention, right view, right action. The Buddha taught that kusala kama, wholesome action, bears fruit in its own time. Just as not all karma ripens immediately, not all merit blooms on schedule. But every kind deed, every prayer, every gesture of care, even when unseen, is a seed in the field of consciousness. You may not see it sprout today or tomorrow, but it's there, becoming. Modern psychology echoes this truth. Healing isn't linear. Growth isn't always visible. Sometimes the most important changes happen underground, in the rewiring of thought, in the quiet shift from fear to trust. You may think you're stuck, but beneath the surface, your nervous system is softening. Your inner voice is changing tone. Your resilience is growing roots. Just like winter, what looks dead is often just preparing to rise. Back in the village, the man kept visiting his frozen patch of earth. And one morning, long after he stopped expecting anything, he saw green. A single shoot, thin as thread, reaching up through ice. He smiled, not with surprise, but with the calm joy of someone who had already bloomed inside. The villagers came, not to mock this time, but to learn. They asked him what he had done. He said, "I gave the ground something to remember, and then I stayed, even when it gave me nothing in return." By the end of spring, the garden was alive. But more than that, so was he. He laughed with the children, shared herbs with the monks, taught people how to plant even when the sky said no. And when asked what saved him, he replied, "It wasn't the garden. It was the faith that something would grow if I just kept showing up." So now, dear listener, breathe. If your winter has been long, if your heart has been waiting, if the soil of your life feels barren, do not give up. Not all growth announces itself. Not all miracles look like blossoms. Sometimes the greatest transformation is that you are still here, still tending, still loving. As the Buddha said, "Drop by drop the pot is filled. So too the wise one fills with merit, little by little." Dhammapada, verse 122. Let tonight be a drop, a seed, a soft turning. You don't need to see the flowers yet. You only need to keep coming back to the soil. With kindness, with patience, your garden will come, and when it does, it will feel like home. Story 15. The Boy Who Talked to His Karma. A symbolic tale of cause and effect, healing through awareness, and the surprising kindness of consequence. Some nights, your past feels closer than your breath, not in guilt, but in questions. Why did that happen? Was it my fault? Is this karma? Tonight, if your mind is circling back to old choices, if your heart is heavy with quiet regrets, this story is for you. Because karma isn't punishment, it's conversation. And sometimes, if you're still enough, it will answer. There was once a boy who met his karma in the shape of a child. He had just turned 10. He was sitting by a stream behind his school, kicking stones into the water, wondering why everything always went wrong. He got blamed for things he didn't do, fell sick on his birthday, lost his best friend without reason. So he looked up at the sky and shouted, "What did I do to deserve this?" And someone behind him whispered, "Would you like to know?" The boy turned. Standing there was another boy, same age, same height, same face, but his eyes were older, still, heavy like pages in an ancient book. "Who are you?" he asked. "I'm your karma," the boy replied. Everything you've done, everything done to you, everything you carry, even when you don't realize it. The boy blinked. You look like me. I am you, Karma said, but I'm also the you that others have met, the echo, the ripple. They sat together by the stream. Karma picked up a rock and tossed it gently. The water rippled outward. See that? He said. Every choice you make moves through the world. Some return as gifts, some as lessons, but none disappear. The boy asked, even little things? Karma nodded, especially little things. But what if I didn't mean it? The boy whispered. I was angry. I didn't know it would hurt anyone. Karma smiled. I'm not here to punish. I'm here to reflect. You're not bad. You're just growing. The boy lowered his head. I miss my friend. I yelled at him. He never talked to me again. Karma placed a hand on his. You can't undo the past, but you can shape what comes next. Let's pause here. In Buddhist teaching, karma means action and the results of action. Not fate, not cosmic revenge, but the simple truth. What you do matters. What you think matters. What you say matters. Because everything creates impact, not always visible, but always real. Karma is not a judge, it's a mirror. It shows us how we're living and gives us infinite chances to choose again. Modern psychology speaks similarly. Our patterns, reactions, fears, habits are shaped by what came before. But healing comes not through blame, but through awareness. The moment we see clearly, we gain power to shift. We can say, that was me, and now I want to grow. Even children, when treated with gentleness and truth, learn to self-reflect, to repair. And adults too can begin again, always. Back by the stream, the boy asked, will you always follow me? Karma tilted his head. I don't follow. I live inside you, but I don't control you. Then, can I change you? Karma nodded. By changing yourself. The boy stood, wiped his hands on his shirt. I think I'll say sorry tomorrow, even if he doesn't forgive me. Karma smiled. That changes everything. The boy walked home lighter. He still made mistakes, still got angry, still forgot sometimes. But now he noticed. And when he noticed, he paused, chose differently. And in time, he didn't see karma anymore, because he had become friends with him. Now, dear one, soften. If you've hurt someone, forgive yourself by living differently. If you've been hurt, choose peace over bitterness. Karma isn't chasing you. It's waiting for your awareness. As the Buddha said, by oneself is evil done. By oneself is one defiled. By oneself is evil undone. By oneself is purified. Dhammapada, verse 165. You are not defined by what you were. You are shaped by what you do next. Close your eyes. Drop your pebble gently into the water. Watch the ripples stretch like hope. And rest, knowing that tonight you can begin again. Story 16. The Temple Made of Falling Leaves. A quiet tale of impermanence, graceful surrender, and the sanctuary within change. Some places live only for a season, and yet stay with us forever. Not because they lasted, but because they taught us how to let go. Tonight, if you feel something slipping from your hands, if your heart holds a name, a moment, or a place that no longer remains, this story is for you. Because not everything that disappears is lost. There once was a temple built from falling leaves. It stood in a forest that no map recorded, where the wind spoke in ancient dialects, and every step on the moss whispered stories. No stone, no wood, only leaves, golden, russet, fading, collected and arranged by an old monk with a gentle smile and very few belongings. Each morning he swept the ground beneath his temple, knowing that by evening it would all fall again. And that was the point. Travelers who stumbled upon the temple were confused. Why build something that doesn't last? They asked. The monk would smile, bow, and say, "So it can keep teaching." They would shake their heads and leave. But sometimes one stayed. And those were the ones who learned what cannot be taught. One autumn, a young woman came to the forest. She had lost her partner, her job, her home, and something deeper, a sense of who she was. She found the leaf temple on the third day, almost by accident. She stood in silence, watching the monk bend and place one crimson leaf atop another with the care of someone arranging stars. Finally, she asked, "What happens when it rains?" He looked up, eyes full of sunlight. "It becomes what it was always meant to." She stayed, helped him build, watched it fall, built again. Every evening the wind came. Every evening the temple dissolved. At first she mourned each collapse. Then she began to see beauty in the falling. One morning she woke early and whispered, "I think I understand now." The monk replied, "No, but you feel it, and that is better." Let us pause here. In the Buddhist teaching, all things are marked by anicca, impermanence. Nothing, not youth, not love, not sorrow, can be held forever. To suffer is not wrong, but to cling is to multiply pain. We suffer not because things change, but because we resist the change. The leaf temple reminds us, everything is sacred in its becoming and its passing. Even what breaks blesses. Modern psychology agrees. Loss is not always trauma. It can be transition. When we allow ourselves to feel grief without freezing, when we honor what was and let go of needing it to stay, we grow. Neuroscience shows the brain is capable of emotional rebalancing, even after deep sorrow, but only when we stop trying to go back. The temple that stood yesterday was never meant to last, but it was meant to be lived in, fully. Back in the forest, the woman stayed through the season. She stopped asking how long she would remain. She stopped checking the calendar. One day, she built the temple alone. The monk watched from a distance. She did not notice he was gone. That evening, it rained. She stood there as the leaves were carried by water and wind. She did not cry. She bowed and whispered, "Thank you." When she left the forest, nothing had changed. The world was still the same, but she was not. She no longer feared endings. She no longer clung to roles, names, or stories. She carried a few leaves in her pocket, not as souvenirs, but as reminders. Build, let fall, build again. Now, dear listener, exhale. If something is leaving, let it. If something has fallen, bless it. You are not meant to hold everything. You are meant to witness, to love, to release. As the Buddha said, all conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. Dhammapada, verse 277. Let tonight be the wind. Let your thoughts fall like leaves. Let your heart build again, softly, patiently, without fear. Sleep now, as if beneath a canopy of golden leaves, falling gently into the quiet of your breath. Story 17, The Ghost Who Forgot He Was Dead.
a surreal tale of identity, clinging, and the soft release that comes with waking up from our own illusions. Some nights feel like echoes. You move through them like mist, remembering something, forgetting what. If you've ever felt invisible in your own life, if you've ever wondered why nothing feels quite real anymore, this story is for you. Because sometimes we are haunted not by spirits, but by who we used to be. There once was a ghost who didn't know he had died. He woke each day in the same house, followed the same routine, brushed hair that no longer grew, put on shoes that never touched the ground, spoke to people who no longer looked his way. But he noticed none of this. To him, everything still felt normal, just a little quieter.
Just a little lonelier. His name was Haku. Years ago, he had been a father, a school teacher, a lover of warm miso and morning walks. He had once dreamed of writing a book, but always said later. Then one rainy afternoon, the bus never stopped in time, and later never came, except in his mind it did, because Haku kept living, in habit, not in truth. He wandered the house like clockwork, tried to cook meals he could not taste, tried to teach lessons to empty chairs. He blamed the silence on bad weather, on others being too busy. He never once asked, "Where am I?" Because the memory of living was louder than the reality of being gone. One day, a little boy moved into the house. He saw Haku immediately. Children often do. "Why are you so sad?" the boy asked. "I'm not sad," Haku said. "I'm just waiting." "For what?" "My life. It must be coming back." The boy tilted his head. "But this isn't yours anymore." Haku frowned. "What do you mean?" "This house, these days, they belong to someone else now." Let us pause here. In Buddhism, clinging to self is the root of suffering. The anatta doctrine, no self, teaches that what we call I is merely a collection of processes, conditions, memories. When we fixate on identity, on who we were, what we had, what we planned, we become like Haku, a ghost of our own making, alive in repetition but cut off from presence. Modern psychology calls this dissociation. When the pain of change or loss is too great, the mind retreats into patterns. We keep going through motions, relationships, jobs, roles. But something is missing, a sense of aliveness. And healing comes not by adding more, but by waking up to what is here now. Even if that means grieving who we were. Back in the story, the boy visited Haku each day. He brought toys, paper cranes, and questions that made Haku think. If no one sees you, do you still exist the same way? What if your life isn't missing, just finished? Can something be beautiful even when it's over? Haku began to pause, to sit longer in silence, to listen not for answers, but for something deeper than memory. One night, he walked through the garden. The plum blossoms had returned, but he could not smell them. He stood by the pond, saw no reflection, and for the first time he wept, not from sadness, but from release. "I'm not coming back," he whispered. And the wind, so gentle, so kind, replied, "You don't need to." From that moment, Haku changed. He no longer tried to teach, no longer waited to be seen. He watched, listened, offered silent blessings to the living, then sat under the plum tree, content in his fading. One morning, the boy came and found only petals, and a soft breeze that felt like a goodbye. "Now, dear one, breathe. If you've been living like a ghost, repeating days that no longer hold you, perhaps it's time to return, not to the past, but to presence. You are not your plans, not your pain, not even your name. You are a changing thing in a changing world, and that is sacred. As the Buddha said, all conditioned things are like dreams, illusions, bubbles, shadows, like dew and lightning. Thus should we view them. Diamond Sutra. Close your eyes. Let go of who you were. Come back to the breath. Let this night be the one where you remember. You are not gone. You are awakening. Story 18. The Monk Who Never Prayed for Himself. A tale of silent compassion, inner exhaustion, and the gentle lesson that even the giver must be held. Some people carry the world in their hands, but forget to open their own. They tend to others, speak blessings into silence, and rarely, if ever, ask for anything in return. If tonight you are one of them, the quiet helper, the silent strength, the one who gives and gives, this story is for you. Because even the most selfless hearts need a moment to rest and receive. There once lived a monk who never prayed for himself. He resided at the edge of a small village, in a bamboo temple with broken tiles and soft moss growing between stones. His name was known in whispers, Gentle Cloud. Farmers brought rice to his doorstep. Children left flowers at his gate. The sick came in search of comfort. The grieving came in search of meaning. And Gentle Cloud gave, always, without asking, without keeping. But something invisible began to grow inside him, a quiet fatigue, not of the body, but of the spirit. He still smiled, still bowed, still offered tea and verses. But at night, beneath the paper lamp, he stared at the empty mat where no prayer had ever been said for his own heart. One evening, a traveling nun stopped at the temple. She noticed the offerings, the worn sandals at the door, the cracks in the floor where years of barefoot service had shaped the earth. She sat across from him in silence, then asked gently, "Whose name do you whisper when you are alone?" He lowered his eyes. "I don't need anything." Her gaze was steady. "But is needing a fault?" He said nothing, but inside, something softened. Let us pause here. In Buddhist teaching, compassion begins within. The Buddha himself taught, "You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection." Yet many, especially those on the path of service, confuse compassion with depletion. To give from emptiness is not virtue. It is a slow forgetting of the self that is also sacred. Confucian thought echoes this balance. In the Analects, it is said, "To establish oneself, help others establish. To develop oneself, help others develop." But notice, oneself comes first. Without deep roots, even the strongest tree cannot hold others in the storm. Modern psychology calls this compassion fatigue, when caregivers lose connection with their own needs and begin to wither from within. The cure is not withdrawal, but wholeness. Back in the temple, the nun stayed for 3 nights. She lit incense. She cleaned the altar. She sang soft chants at dusk. On the 4th morning, she left a note. Even the sun sets to rest. Even the moon retreats to shadow. Your light need not burn forever to be sacred. Beside the note, she left a prayer bead, the last one from her own mala. And for the first time in his life, Gentle Cloud held something meant just for him. That evening, he did something unfamiliar. He sat, not to serve, not to teach, not to guide. He sat for himself. He closed his eyes and whispered, not a chant, but a question. What would it mean to be loved? The bamboo rustled, as if answering. The temple seemed warmer, and in that stillness he prayed, for himself. The villagers noticed a change, not less kindness, but more depth. His words were slower, his gaze more anchored. He began to say things like, I will join you after my rest, and let us share the silence together. People still came to receive, but now they gave too. Tea, laughter, quiet songs in the courtyard. The monk smiled, not because he had no needs, but because he had finally met them. Now, dear one, inhale gently. You are allowed to pause. You are allowed to receive. You are allowed to pray for your own healing without guilt. There is no virtue in emptiness when you were born to be full of light. As the Buddha said, if you light a lamp for someone else, it will also brighten your own path. But you must still walk the path. You must still rest. Close your eyes. Place your own name at the altar of your breath, and let this be your prayer, just for you. Story 19. The Sparrow That Carried No Grudge. A parable of lightness, forgiveness, and the quiet liberation that comes when we stop feeding the storm. Some burdens weigh nothing on the body, but everything on the soul. They are not carried in the hands, but behind the eyes, and between the silent beats of an aching heart. If tonight you feel the heaviness of a name, a face, a memory you have not forgiven, this story is for you. Because forgiveness isn't a favor to others, it's a door you open for your own wings to fly through. There once lived a sparrow who forgot how to sing. She wasn't born silent. In fact, she was once the loudest voice in the canopy. Her song so clear that even the wind paused to listen. But one spring morning, an arrow meant for a hawk grazed her wing. She didn't fall, but something inside her cracked. The archer never saw her, never aimed for her, never knew. But she remembered, and she carried that wound like a seed in her chest. Time passed. Her feathers healed, but her heart did not. She flew with the others, but never in the center. Ate the same berries, but tasted only ash. She would perch at the edge of every gathering and hum to herself, a bitter tune only she could hear. Why me? Why then? Why didn't they see me? She thought, if I let this go, they'll never know what they did. They'll never be sorry. So she held it, not because she wanted to, but because she didn't know who she was without it. One day, she met an old owl. He sat on a low branch, eyes half closed, as if listening to something far away. You carry something, he said without turning. She froze. No, I'm fine. He turned toward her, eyes soft as dusk. Then why do you fly like your wings are wet? She looked down, and for the first time she noticed she no longer soared. She strained. Let us pause here. The Buddha taught that holding on to anger is like holding a hot coal with the intent to throw it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. In Dhammapada verse 5 it is written, hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal rule. But forgiveness in Buddhism is not a moral demand. It is an act of inner clarity. You see that holding on is holding you. And when you see clearly, you drop the coal.
Not because they deserve it, but because you do. Psychologists call this emotional unburdening. When you let go of resentment, the nervous system softens. The mind becomes more adaptive. The body sleeps deeper. Research shows that chronic anger is tied to heart disease, anxiety, depression. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's refusing to let your pain become your identity. Like the sparrow, you deserve to sing again. Back in the forest, the owl told a story. There was once a tree who hated winter. Every year it cursed the snow, shivered in rage, refused to let its leaves fall. So the wind took them anyway. But because the tree clung too long, spring could not come. Only when it wept and let go did the blossoms return. The sparrow blinked. That's just a story. The owl smiled. Like your anger. That night, the sparrow flew to her favorite perch. She looked at the moon, felt the wind on her healed wing. She whispered to the night, I forgive you, even if you don't know what you did, even if you never meant it, even if you never say sorry. I forgive you because I miss flying. The next morning, she sang, not loud, not perfect, but true.
The trees leaned closer. The creek shimmered. Even the clouds seemed to pause. And far away, the archer, an old man now, looked up from his garden, and for reasons he could not explain, felt tears well in his eyes. Now, dear one, listen to your breath. What are you still carrying? Whose name burns like a small coal in the shadows of your chest? What would it feel like to set it down just for tonight? You don't have to forget. You don't have to trust again. But you can choose to stop the wound from speaking for you. Let forgiveness be your wings. As the Zen saying goes, to forgive is to set a prisoner free and discover the prisoner was you. Sleep now, not because the past is fixed, but because your heart is free. Story 20. The Well Beneath the Drought. A tale of quiet exhaustion, forgotten depth, and the return to something that was never truly lost. Some silences are not peaceful. They are dry, cracked like old earth under too many suns. If tonight your spirit feels parched, if the well of inspiration, joy, or even simple willpower seems empty, this story is for you, because what is dry on the surface may still be waiting far below. There was once a village that forgot how to drink. It hadn't always been that way. Once its rivers sang, its wells overflowed, its people laughed even while carrying heavy buckets. But then, the rain stopped. At first, they waited. Then they worried. Then they began to dig new wells, frantically, desperately, scattering holes across the land like open mouths. But none gave water. And so the village dried, and the people with it. In the middle of the drought lived an old woman. She spoke little, tilled no fields, built no new wells. She simply sat by the same stone well, the one her grandmother had sat beside, and her grandmother's grandmother before that. When asked why she stayed there, she smiled. Because I'm not thirsty for water, I'm thirsty for remembering. No one understood, and so they left her there, sitting in the dust. But let us pause here. The Buddha taught that all beings have within them what is called Tathagata Garbha, the seed of awakening. Even when the surface of the mind is troubled, underneath lies stillness. Droughts of spirit are not caused by the world alone.
They come when we forget how to return to what is already within. In the Dhammapada, it is said, "The fool seeks happiness far away. The wise grows it beneath their feet." In modern language, we call this burnout, not laziness, not failure, but the deep depletion that comes from endless striving without stillness. We keep digging, new projects, new solutions, new distractions. But healing rarely comes from the surface. It comes from stillness, from listening, from sinking. Like the old woman by the silent stone. One day, a child wandered to her side. He was too young to be bitter, too thirsty to be proud. He sat down and asked, "Why hasn't this well dried up like the others?" She ran her hand along the mossy rim. "Because it's not trying to prove anything." The boy blinked. She smiled. "This well isn't desperate. It simply waits." Then she placed her palm on his chest. "And so must you." That night, the boy returned alone.
He closed his eyes, and for the first time in his life, he didn't wish for more. He didn't plead, didn't dig. He simply sat and breathed. And beneath his breath, something shifted. A coolness rose in his chest, like the memory of a stream. And his thirst began to fade. The next morning, the old woman showed him a secret. She lifted the stone cover, lowered the rope slowly, and when it came back up, a wooden pail of water, clear as glass. "But how?" he whispered. She smiled. "You thought the drought was outside, but it was inside you. Now, dear one, listen. If you feel dry, uninspired, unseen, unmotivated, know this. You do not need to keep digging new holes. You are not broken. You are simply tired. There is a well in you that has never dried. It waits in the quiet. It waits in your breath. It waits beneath the need to be more. As Zen Master Dogen once said, if you cannot find the truth right where you are, where else do you expect to find it? Close your eyes. Place a hand over your chest. Sit by the well, not to draw water, but to remember that it's there. Sleep now, not because all is solved, but because something deeper than thirst has been found. Story 21. The Bell That Rang Without Sound. A tale of silence, presence, and the quiet resonance that lingers long after words are gone. Not all that is heard comes through the ears. Not all that is said comes through the tongue. Some truths arrive without sound and speak to the part of us that listens without needing to understand. If tonight your heart seeks peace, but not noise, presence, but not pressure, this story is for you. Because sometimes the most powerful bell is the one that never rings. There was once a monastery built around a bell that made no sound. It stood in the center of the stone courtyard, tall, bronze, ancient, its surface carved with lotus petals and cloud patterns. The monks bowed to it each morning. They lit incense beside it at dusk, but they never rang it. Visitors would often ask, "What is the purpose of a bell that does not ring?" And the abbot would smile. "It rings where sound cannot reach." Many years ago, the bell had a voice. Its chime was said to reach beyond the mountains, so clear that birds paused mid-flight, so deep that it stirred memories in the bones of the old. But one day, during a storm, a lightning bolt struck the wooden frame. The bell cracked slightly, and from that moment on, it made no sound. The villagers were heartbroken. Some monks wanted to replace it, but the abbot, an old practitioner named Master Hoshin, asked that it remain. Let us teach us a different kind of listening, he said. Let us pause here. In Zen, silence is not absence, it is presence, refined. Master Linji once said, "When you're silent, it speaks. When you speak, it is silent." The Buddha himself taught in moments of deep stillness. His silence after a disciple's question was sometimes the entire teaching. Modern minds often fear silence. We fill it with explanations, updates, reassurances. But healing often arises when the noise stops. Modern psychology calls this therapeutic silence. It is the space where people find their own voice, unrushed, unprovoked. Silence activates the parasympathetic nervous system, calming the body, slowing the heart, inviting integration. For introverts, for trauma survivors, for those overwhelmed by a world that speaks too fast, silence is not empty, it is sanctuary. To sit in silence and still feel seen is a rare and holy thing. Back at the monastery, a young monk named Ren struggled with silence. He had come from a noisy city where approval was earned through performance and love was measured in words. He often sat by the silent bell, frustrated. I can't learn anything from something that doesn't speak. One day, the abbot invited him to sit beside the bell for an entire day. No tasks, no chants, just presence. Reluctantly, he agreed. Hours passed. The sun moved. Birds came and went. And slowly, something inside Ren began to shift. He noticed his breath, noticed the ants moving across the mossy stones, noticed the old warmth in his chest he had mistaken for emptiness. He began to remember, not thoughts, but feelings. A grandmother's hands, rain on a metal roof, the soft ache of a goodbye he never finished. And suddenly, the bell seemed to hum, not in sound, but in stillness. He wept, not in sadness, but in release. That evening, he bowed to the bell, not because it had spoken, but because it had listened. He finally understood the inscription carved near its base. Those who hear only sound miss half the song. From that day on, he visited the bell often, sat with those who needed no words, became a quiet companion to many who had forgotten the sound of their own breath. Now, dear one, close your eyes. There is a bell in you that has not rung for years, not because it is broken, but because you've been taught to listen only to what shouts. Sit with it. No need to fix, no need to fear. As the Zen saying goes, silence is not the absence of something, it is the presence of everything. Breathe, and let the bell ring, in stillness, in memory, in you. Sleep now, not to escape sound, but to return to the place where silence sings. Story 22. The Lantern That Refused to Burn. A tale of hidden worth, the slow release of shame, and the quiet light that was never truly gone. There are lights that burn without flame, flickering softly in the corners of our chest, beneath years of dust, doubt, and quiet despair. If tonight you feel like your light has dimmed, like no one sees you, like your glow was meant for someone else but not for you, this story is for you. Because even a lantern that has never lit still carries the power to shine. There was once a lantern that refused to burn. It hung quietly in the rafters of a forgotten temple. Its metal rusted, its paper sides faded by time. The others, bright red, glowing with purpose, danced each night in the wind, offering their soft light to the pilgrims below. But this one, tucked in the shadow of a wooden beam, remained dark.
not because it was broken, but because long ago someone whispered, "You were never meant to shine." And the lantern believed them. It had tried once, a long time ago. When it was first hung, its wick had been prepared.
Its frame was sturdy. The monk who placed it there had smiled gently. But before the flame could be lit, another monk scoffed. "That one's too small," he said. "Too plain. Use the red one instead." And so it was left, unlit, unused, unseen. Over the years, it stopped hoping, stopped wanting, began to shrink in its own silence. "I am not like the others," it told itself. "I am not enough." Let us pause here. In Buddhist psychology, this is the voice of avijja, ignorance, not of facts, but of our true nature. It is the forgetting that we are already whole, already luminous. The Buddha once said, "Within this very body, 6 feet in length, lies the world, the arising of the world, and the cessation of the world." What we believe about ourselves becomes the shape of our reality, not because it is true, but because we stop looking for anything else. In modern psychology, we call this internalized shame. It doesn't shout, it whispers. "You're too quiet, too much, too little, too late." And so we hide our gifts, dim our joy, sabotage the flame before it can even start. But healing begins when we question the voice that told us we weren't worthy. When we stop asking, "Am I enough?" and start asking, "Enough for whom?" One night, a storm came. Wind tore through the mountains. Rain lashed against the eaves of the temple. Many of the red lanterns were blown out, their flames sputtering, their paper torn. In the morning, the monks gathered the broken remains. The courtyard felt dim, heavy. That night, the old abbot walked through the temple alone. He looked up and saw, high in the rafters, untouched by wind or water, the unlit lantern, still whole, still waiting. He nodded to himself, then climbed the beam and gently brought it down. He did not clean it, did not repaint its sides, did not apologize for the years. He simply lit a small flame and placed it inside. And something stirred. At first, nothing happened. Then, a soft glow, a trembling warmth, like breath held too long finally released. The lantern pulsed with light, not brilliant, not dazzling, but steady and true. The abbot placed it at the center of the altar. Some monks scoffed again. "Why that one? It's plain." But the abbot only smiled. This lantern survived the storm. Because it had not burned yet, its flame was still waiting. Not every light must shine at the same time. Some are born to glow when the others have gone out. Now, dear one, listen. Your light has not failed you. It has waited. It has watched, endured, weathered silence and scorn, and tonight, perhaps for the first time in years, it asks gently, "May I glow?" Let it flicker, let it tremble, let it begin. You do not need to outshine anyone. You only need to return to the truth of your own warmth. As the Dhammapada says, just as a lamp is not bright without oil, the mind is not bright without wisdom. And wisdom begins when we stop dimming ourselves for someone else's comfort. Sleep now, not as a lantern that failed to burn, but as one who finally remembered. You were never too late. You were simply waiting for your own moment to light the dark. Story 23. The Window That Faced the Mountain. A tale of longing, envy, and the healing that begins when we see with the eyes of the heart. Some views are not found in the world. They are revealed in the soul, once the fog of comparison begins to lift. If tonight you've looked out and wondered, why is their life easier than mine? Why do they shine while I stumble? This story is for you, because what we see through the window often says more about our own heart than about the world outside. There was once a monastery perched along a steep ridge. Its corridors were carved into the cliff, its bells rung by wind alone, its silence held by time. Along one hallway, 30 windows looked out in 30 directions. Some faced forests, some faced valleys, some, if you were lucky, faced the great mountain. The monks rotated rooms once a year as a teaching in detachment, but not everyone accepted that lesson. A young monk named Kaito longed for the mountain view. He had heard the others speak of it, the way morning light painted the cliffs, how mist rose like incense between peaks. But every year, when rooms were reassigned, he received a window facing the monastery wall. Plain, stone, unmoving. "It's not fair," he would mutter. "I chant, I serve, I keep precepts. Why do they get beauty while I stare at bricks?" His heart, once devoted, grew heavy with bitterness. Let us pause here. The Buddha once said, "He who envies others does not obtain peace of mind." This is Isa, envy, a quiet suffering, a thief of joy. In comparison, we forget our own path. We see blessings as limited, as if joy is a bowl, and another's fullness leaves us empty. But the Dharma is not scarce, and perception is often the gate to liberation. In modern psychology, this is called external referencing. We measure our worth by the successes or beauty of others. We think, if I don't have what they have, I must not be enough. But happiness built on comparison is always unstable, because there will always be someone with more, or seemingly more. Healing begins when we look inward for meaning and outward with compassion. One winter, a visiting teacher arrived, an elder monk named Shinji. He carried only a bamboo staff and a quiet smile. When he heard Kaito's frustration, he offered a simple instruction. For the next 30 mornings, sit at your window for an hour. Do not turn your head, do not close your eyes. Just see. Kaito scowled. There's nothing to see. Shinji only bowed, and yet see anyway. And so, reluctantly, Kaito began. At first, he noticed only gray, stone, dust, spiderwebs. But then, on the 4th morning, a shadow moved across the wall. A bird landing just out of view. Its wings fluttered, casting ripples on stone. On the 6th day, sunlight appeared, and with it, a glowing triangle that grew and shrank as clouds passed. By the 10th day, he began to feel not boredom, but stillness. The wall became his teacher. It showed him light without color, change without motion, presence without story. He began to wake earlier, not to seek beauty, but to meet it, exactly where it arrived. One morning, he saw a tiny green vine emerging from a crack in the wall. He wept, not because it was rare, but because it had been there all along, and he had never looked. At the end of the month, Shinji returned. "Well?" he asked. Kaito bowed deeply. "I no longer need the mountain," he said. "I carry it within." Shinji smiled. That is the true view. He tapped the wall with his staff. Many seek the highest peaks, but cannot see the moss at their feet. The wise see the sacred in the ordinary. Now, dear one, close your eyes. What window have you been staring through, thinking others have it better? What wall have you mistaken for a limitation, when it might be a canvas waiting for your gaze? You are not late. You are not forgotten. Your view may not be the mountain, but the light still visits you. The breeze still finds you, and the vine still grows in your quiet cracks. As Master Rokan wrote, "If you look deeply into the palm of your hand, you will see your parents and all generations. All of them are alive in this moment." So too with your window. So too with your life. Breathe. Set down comparison. Return to seeing. And in that seeing, sleep, not in envy, but in presence. Story 24. The Teacup That Chose to Crack. A quiet tale about imperfection, hidden pain, and the sacred gold found in healing what was once broken. Some things break not from weakness, but from wisdom. Because sometimes what needs to be released is the illusion of being whole. If tonight you carry a hidden scar, a wound too old to name, a shame too silent to share, this story is for you. Because even a cracked teacup can hold warmth. And even a broken past can be mended with gold. There was once a teacup that refused to be used. It sat untouched on a shelf in the quiet corner of a Zen kitchen. Delicate, smooth, flawless, or so it seemed. Each morning, the monks would reach for the sturdier cups, the ones with chips, the ones that had seen tea and time and trembling hands. But this one, ivory white, rimmed in silver, remained pristine. Not out of pride, but fear. You see, the teacup had seen another fall long ago. A bowl, once full of miso, had slipped from a novice's hand and shattered against the stone floor. The silence after the crash was louder than the bowl's entire life. No one blamed the novice, but the teacup had watched, and something inside it whispered, "Do not let them use you. Do not let them touch you. If you never risk, you'll never break." So it stayed still, spotless, and alone. Let us pause here. In Buddhism, this is called dukkha, suffering. Not just the pain that happens, but the pain we carry from clinging too tightly to avoid pain itself. The Buddha taught, all conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. But how often do we avoid love, connection, or even life for fear of the cracks they might leave? In modern psychology, this is the protective self, the part of us that says, if I never open up, I'll never be hurt. If I'm perfect, they'll never leave. If I don't feel, I'll never break. But healing does not come from perfection. It comes from presence, from knowing that pain is not the end, but often the beginning. One day, an elder monk named Tetsu entered the kitchen. He was known not for his chanting or his posture, but for his hands, weathered, warm, and wise. He picked up the unused teacup, held it to the morning light, and whispered, "So afraid to be useful." He poured hot water in, not tea, just water. Steam rose, and the cup, for the first time in decades, felt warmth. But then, a sharp sound, a crack, hairline, thin, but unmistakable. The teacup expected to be discarded, but the monk smiled gently. "Good," he said, "now you are ready." The next day, he returned with a small jar of gold resin, a blend of lacquer and powdered gold leaf. Slowly, he traced the crack,
filling it with brightness, not to hide it, but to honor it. The technique was called kintsugi, golden joinery. Not repair, reverence. He placed the cup at the center of the tea table. Visitors came and admired it. Beautiful, they said. Where did it break? And the teacup, if it could speak, would have answered, in the moment I began to trust again. In the moment I chose to feel. It was not ashamed of its crack. It glowed. Now, dear one, perhaps your crack is not visible. Perhaps it is inside. A memory, a betrayal, a silence that never left. You are not weak. You are not ruined. You are simply ready to be filled with something brighter than shame. As the Dhammapada says, better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. So let tonight be that word, not broken, but becoming. Not flawed, but forged. Not never again, but now I begin. Breathe.
Hold yourself gently. You are the teacup, and you are the gold. Sleep, not as someone afraid to break, but as someone brave enough to heal. Story 25. The River That Forgot to Flow. A story of stillness, stuckness, and the sacred return to movement from within. Sometimes what keeps us from moving forward is not a lack of desire, but a quiet forgetting of how to flow. If tonight your soul feels stagnant, if your dreams have dried at the edges, if you're waiting for something, anything to stir again, this story is for you. Because even the river that seems most still is only waiting for the right kind of remembering. There was once a river that stopped midstream. It did not dry up, nor was it blocked by stone or branch. It simply forgot. At the bend of two villages, where it once curved in graceful motion, it stood still. Clear, motionless. Birds hovered. Children came to throw pebbles, but the ripples no longer carried. The water swallowed sound, and silence pooled. The villagers were puzzled. A dam? An earthquake? Too much silt? But no cause could be found. Only the stillness. Only the hush. Now let us pause here. There is a moment in many lives, especially past the age of 45, when the flow slows. Not in body, but in meaning. You wake, and what once brought joy now feels heavy, empty, mechanical. This is not laziness. It is not failure. It is what the Buddha called tanha, a thirst misdirected. We chase goals, recognition, busy calendars, and forget that movement is not the same as direction. When the thirst dries, we stop not from lack, but from overfilling on things that do not nourish. In modern psychology, this is called a freeze response. Not fight, not flight, but freeze. A way the body protects itself from overwhelm. A way the soul signals, I cannot carry this pace. I need a gentler way. To heal it, we do not push. We listen. We melt. We remember how to feel. One morning, a quiet monk arrived from the hills. He wore no name, carried no staff, only a small bowl carved from driftwood. He did not question the villagers. He did not measure the flow. He simply sat beside the still river. For 7 days he watched. He listened, not to the silence, but to the memories held within it. And on the 8th day, he did something unusual. He stepped into the river and began to hum. It was not a melody, but a remembering, a low vibration, soft and circular, like mist turning in its sleep. The villagers laughed. A chant? That's your solution? But the river quivered, just slightly, a tremble at the edge, a breath long held, exhaled. The monk continued. Each morning he sang. Each night the river softened. And on the 12th day, a single leaf floated down and moved, slowly, gracefully, forward. The river had not been blocked. It had been forgotten. Forgotten by those who rushed its banks. Forgotten by the ones who drank but never listened. Forgotten even by itself. It had taken in too much. Pollution of noise, expectation, disconnection. And in doing so, it lost the memory of its own nature. But through song, through attention, through love, it returned. Not by force, but by feeling. Now, dear one, perhaps you too have forgotten how to flow. Not because you're broken, but because you've carried too much for too long. And the current inside you became still to survive. You are not late. You are not lost. You are resting before returning. And that stillness, that breathless hush, is not failure. It is the moment before remembering. As Lao Tzu said, when nothing is done, nothing is left undone. This is Wu Wei, effortless action, the art of allowing. So tonight, you do not need to fix yourself, or plan, or strive. Only sit by the shore of your soul and hum. Let the sound of your breath be enough. Let your stillness be sacred. Let your healing be gentle. And when the time is right, your river will move again, not with noise, but with knowing. Close your eyes now. Place your hand on your chest. Feel the quiet tide within. Not rushing, not forcing, just remembering. You are the river, and the river is ready. Sleep well, flow softly. The story returns to silence, and so do you. You've walked with us through many nights. Listened to stories whispered from old temples, from teacups and rivers, from monks and mothers, from your own reflection. You've heard about cracks that shine, winds that speak, bells that ring without sound. But none of these stories were really about others. They were about you. The quiet places in you that long to be seen, to be heard, to be held without fixing. In each tale there was a thread, of breath, of kindness, of letting go. And now, as this final story softens into stillness, we do not say goodbye. Because true healing doesn't end. It ripples, like a gentle wave beneath the surface of your everyday life. The Buddha once said, "Just as a candle cannot burn without fire, man cannot live without a spiritual life." You've touched that flame tonight, not in fire, but in warmth. So now, dear one, breathe. Let go of needing to know. Let go of fixing, of striving, of becoming. Just be. Let your exhale be the closing of this book. Let your inhale be the start of a new chapter, written not with answers, but with presence. If these stories touched something in you, not loudly, but gently, we invite you to stay with us. This channel is a lantern, and you are the reason it glows. So when the world feels heavy again, or your heart grows quiet from carrying too much, come back. There will always be a story here, waiting to meet you in the dark. Until then, may you walk slowly. May you listen deeply. May you sleep in peace. Subscribe to The Empty Boat, where stories don't teach, they remember.